Well, good evening, everyone. I've decided to finally bite the bullet and try the publishing thing, and have put out a story. And I guess this is a brief introduction to the story, to where I'm hoping to go as an author. And I'm going to read a short excerpt from the story that I just put out, The Way of Cain. Um, Most of you who are going to see this right now already know who I am. My name is Spurgeon Root. I live in Regina. I work in the inner city here for a church. I do outreach, community development kinds of work. And my writing has been influenced by my time here in the neighborhood. A lot of the stories are um, ways that I've processed things, different, sometimes specific events, but more commonly, just how I've wrestled with issues of humanity, issues of theology as a pastor, and as a Christian in general. How does my faith interact with issues of violence, with um, issues of trauma, things like that. So the story of the Way of Cain isn't directly inspired by a particular event. It was more um, kind of processing my thinking around how violence is dealt with. Um, so a lot of what I've written, when people ask what I write, I will say sometimes that I do speculative narrative theology. And I mentioned that to someone today, and they went, "Oh, you write heresy?" Uh, no, but they are issues that I'm interested in engaging with in levels not so much of simply stating doctrine or this is the right thing or the wrong thing to believe, but how do we wrestle with some of these issues? So, The Way of Cain is that kind of story. There's theological issues in it. At the same time, I hope I've written a story that someone can simply read and enjoy. And if you don't want to think too much about the other issues, then don't. Just enjoy the story, hopefully. Um, for people who are wondering maybe a little more about what I mean by a genre of speculative narrative theology, think C.S. Lewis. In fact, The Way of Cain was kind of inspired by um, the stories that C.S. Lewis has written. So, Paralandra and Out of the Silent Planet in particular. Um, but I love the story of the Great Divorce. Um, so that kind of thing, where an author is engaging with theological thoughts, but not attempting to indoctrinate or to communicate doctrine particularly, but just to wrestle with some of these thoughts. Um, a lot of other Christian authors have done this as well. I think Frank Peretti, The Oath, This Present Darkness, those kinds of stories where there's theology involved, but again, it's not doctrine per se. So that's the kind of thing that I've written and that I enjoy writing. It helps me process things, as I've said. Um, I hope they're also a doorway, maybe for people who aren't Christian, who don't think of themselves in those terms, and aren't interested in doctrine per se, but might be interested in thinking about some of these things. So it's a kind of a doorway, perhaps. Um, but again, hopefully I've written something that is readable and enjoyable no matter where you land or what you think about any of those kinds of things. So to to finish my first little blog, vlog, whatever the heck this is, I'm not good at this technology stuff, obviously. Uh, Sorry, but I would like to read a short excerpt from The Way of Cain to give you an idea of what the story is like. In his dreams, it happened again. A roar of sound, an invisible wall of air slamming through the atmosphere. The house shifted beneath his feet, and the explosion shattered the windows of his home. Adder ran from the house, pulling his pistol as he dove out the door. Marcy's blackened form slumped behind the wheel of their car. Aaron lay on the ground, 30 feet from the burning remains of the vehicle. Adder rolled his body over his daughter's, putting out the flames. He seized the door of his car and ripped it off. Marcy's last words were, "You bastard." Marcy and 6-year-old Aaron were pronounced dead at the scene. Adder sat up with a start and absently touched the scar tissue on his hands and forearms, his last connection with his wife and daughter. Adder stretched and rubbed his eyes, carefully surveying the now busy rest stop. There were 6 rigs stopped, and 3 of the drivers were buying coffee from some local charity fundraiser. Adder quickly dismissed them as threats, and his eyes moved on. 24 or so cars, minivans, and SUVs filled the parking lot. People stretched their legs, walked their pets, and took their children to the bathroom. A small group of people were gathered around his black Harley, but all were keeping a respectful distance. Adder surreptitiously checked his guns and slipped on his jacket. A grandfatherly-looking man walked over and smiled and said, "Hi there, big fella." Adder was startled that a stranger would walk up and greet him. It hadn't happened in years. It had also been years, he reflected, since he had been out and around without his colors, the back patch that identified him as a demon. Wearing the colors of an outlaw motorcycle club tended to reduce the number of strangers and non-bikers who would talk to him. Adder nodded to the man, but said nothing. "I got a son that rides. Picked it up from his old man." The fellow grinned and stuck out his hand. "I'm Jake." Adder returned the gesture, his hand nearly swallowing the other man's. "I can't ride as much as I used to. Bad back." Adder rolled his sleeping bag as the man continued to talk. "Where are you headed?" "South." "Ah, my son used to ride like that. Pick a direction and go. Can't any more. He's got himself a little girl." An older lady waved at Jake. "Well, I gotta go. Hope you have good weather." "Thanks." Adder strapped his sleeping bag onto his bike and put on his shades. When he fired up the V-twin, every head snapped around and paused for a moment to gaze at the lone figure. Several children waved. Adder cracked the throttle open and watched the rest stop get smaller in his mirror. So there's a little excerpt. Hope you enjoy the reading, and looking forward to putting out some more writing here very soon. Thanks.